Frankie Molina. Hey everybody, welcome into the Creed of Crypto live stream. I am Boi Crypto. I have here with me, as always, my friend and co-host Crypto Ewok, and actually, our special guest appears to have actually hit us up in the green room. If he is ready to, well, I was going to say wait, and I'll wait for a thumbs up from him to make sure he wants to come on now, but he's on. So welcome in. We've got plain black tea Frank Molina, taking a page out of Richard Hart's playbook there. Frank, we'll just get to it right now. How you doing tonight, man? Good to see you.
Great. Happy to be here, guys. Can you guys hear me well? Is the mic working? Too hot?
You're good.
Little hot, but yeah, you're good now. Yeah, sounds good. But yeah, let's welcome everybody in real quick to the channel. We've got Patrick's Astro and stuff, Humberto Gonzalez, DJen Moonboy, and lots of others. Mr. Chinks will be joining us here tonight. We got a big show for you. We got obviously stuff come out about Richard Hart versus the SEC today, the motion to dismiss, which people have poured over, and we will talk about for sure. Major updates appear to be coming to PulseX and the PulseChain ecosystem. We're going to get to that. We'll take a look at some pricing and stuff like that. But again, our special guest, once again, back by popular demand and back because he has things he wants to say because he's so passionate about this ecosystem and crypto and, hedging against the ever worsening US dollar. It is Frank Molina. So, Ewok, Frank, welcome in, friends. And let's get right over to you, Frank. I mean, you kind of hit me up with some things you wanted to talk about. I saw you've been tweeting the last couple of days about just some of your general thoughts about this ecosystem. But let's get what's on your mind first. I want to hear from you. So let's hear it.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for bringing me on. Every time I come on here, I feel like I can speak freely and without losing my train of thought. So I really wanted to come back. The past few days, I take my moments of, random disappearance and then random, reappearance. So typically that goes for a series of a few weeks or so. But whenever we were in the bear market and I was encouraging everybody to go do their own research and to go buy up their positions, that's when I wanted to be the most active because that's typically when you're going to be able to get into those positions at the very bottom. You're going to be able to reap those rewards in the future. I, for one, myself, I don't care about anything because whatever the market does at this point, I'm already up, right? So I hope that everybody who was listening to me a couple months ago, or not just me, but anybody who was, proclaiming about buying the bottom, they're sitting pretty on their position as well. A lot of people have a very narrow mindset when it comes to this, new asset class and this new way of approaching investing. And unfortunately, it's a very, in my opinion, it's a very, toxic mindset because it's a microwave mentality. They want their gains right now. They want to be able to retire, whatever it is that they want to do. And when someone like me is appreciating, 300, 400% from the bottom, even at these low prices, I take it from a very gratitude perspective. Because for me to do that in the traditional financial markets would have taken me decades. Right. So I'm not over here complaining. I'm over here, hoping other people change their mindset to understand, hey, listen, yeah, it may not be the Solana, these massive meme coins types of pumps, but you're sitting on something that if you just sit still, time has to go by regardless. If there wasn't for PulseX and PulseChain, you have to go work a job anyway. So you might as well just sit tight and let the years go by, and eventually you're able to reap those rewards. Now, what we're going to get into later is that I have no interest in going back into USD, more than I need to, because it's a worthless currency that's not backed by anything, right? So that's my little, update on what's going on. I see a lot of people have been doing a lot of effort to engage the community and bring other people outside of this, just the realms of the RH ecosystem. So I'm very, very excited to see what the next few months hold,
Cool.
Totally. Go ahead, Ewok.
Well, no, I was just going to say, you said you take your little 2 week, 2 month breaks, whatever they are. It's been 2 months since we've had you on last. How do you feel things have changed? Like from the time you were on and stepped away and came back, what kind of I don't know, are there any changes that you're seeing in the mentality of people, in the moods, things like that?
Morale, because a
Yeah.
lot of people are just seeing that, hey, why isn't our assets pumping and everybody else is going in this direction, right? And when the whole EHEX thing happened too, I was actually very disappointed in everybody in the community, right? Because you just anybody who's upset at things like that, just they don't understand what they hold. And I don't know how much I have to, and other people have to yell to the microphone, hey, can you please understand what you're holding? If this was a meme coin, I'd be completely for it. I'd be completely, supporting your ranting and your complaining. But people that have been here for a very, 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 very long time, I started seeing them complaining. And then that made me very disappointed because as leaders and, quote unquote influencers, you need to have a certain level of stoicism when you present yourself to the public. People who don't know, people who aren't, as knowledge as you are, you're supposed to be someone that they look up to, people who rely on you to give them some sort of, hey, these are the facts don't change, right? And whatever's happening in the interim, in the moment, that's all emotional reactions, right? So don't rely on the emotional reactions, but look at the facts, and the facts never changed. What happens to price in that moment, on that day, or that series of days, or a series of weeks or months, does not change the fact that Hex was always going to be a long-term store of value. The code never changed. It's never failed us. There's going to be volatility. That's in Bitcoin, that's in Ethereum, that's in everything, right? You can't change that. Okay. And then when Richard spoke about it, he was just verbally speaking out loud what everybody already knew. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at starting and ending the stake on Ethereum costs significantly more than starting and ending stake on PulseChain. Now, let me put it in this perspective. If you are a fund manager and you have hundreds of millions and tens of millions of dollars ready to deploy, do you really care about the starting and ending gas fees on the Ethereum network? You don't really care in proportion to the amount of capital that you have. Richard gave you the opportunity for the average person who doesn't have that type of capital to go do the same thing on the PulseChain network. But both of those products are the exact same thing. There's nothing that he did that people already didn't know. But the market just wants to react. They're very, very emotional. And that's where immaturity comes on, right? They still haven't experienced enough life. They haven't been through enough aspects of business and investing where they know, hey, this may not be doing what Solana meme coins are doing, but this is the real deal. And I can argue in so many different ways why anything in the Richard Heart system is better than the US dollar. That's factual. That is not a matter of opinion. It can be taken and interpreted as opinion, but when you know the facts, it's really not. So I speak from what the US dollar is, what are the facts about the Richard Heart tokens, what it is the problem that it's solving, and then it's much more than just freedom of speech and freedom to transact and freedom to do what you want and privacy. It's much more than that. That is a very big component of it, but it's the same vision that Satoshi had. Satoshi said, I'm going to create a new monetary system that's going to be detached and depegged from the US dollar because the US dollar was worth nothing. So if you understand what Bitcoin did and the problem that it solved, and then you understand that Richard Hart has those same principles and values where everybody else in the crypto community just had a grifter mindset. They took advantage of the new asset class emerging, and they wanted to take money from consumers and retail and naive individuals. Richard Hart says, I don't need your money. I have hundreds of millions myself. I'm going to create something that follows the same path as Satoshi had, but better. And that's what PulseChain, PulseX, and Hex is. That's literally what Hex was designed to do. It was a better Bitcoin. And then he just made it even better by forking it to PulseChain. But the concept and the ideology behind it never changed. The only thing that changed was emotional retail that caused volatility in the price.
I want to ask you this, and all that is really well said, and you always get to the root of like kind of philosophy of the markets and like the investors in the markets, and with some of these emotions, and you mentioned like the Richard Hart tweet about EHEX, and I agree. I mean, what he did was just make an observation, and then the market took it as like, oh, okay, he says this again. He didn't really say anything in that tweet that anybody didn't know. But do you think, like, not just in this ecosystem, because, it would be unfair to say that people that invest in this ecosystem are the only ones in crypto that act like that. And I know you're not saying that, but some people may think it. But do you think that people that invest in crypto, like we do, it does probably skew younger, of course, than the classical markets and stuff like that. Do you think that that's part of the reason that we see these kind of reactions? And you make a great point too about people just not understanding what they hold. But what do you think just captures people so badly to have these kind of reactions and to capitulate, get out of their EHEX position and stuff like that, and get so emotional? I mean, is it purely just like maybe age, investment time horizon, like lack of experience? Because it's a great dichotomy also, and I always talk about this on this channel with Ewok about crypto, is like the fastest gains in human history, but people can't be patient enough, and presumably it's because of the volatility, I guess. But yeah, what do you make of that? I mean, what do you think it is in crypto that makes people and in this ecosystem like just so prone to act like that with their emotions? And then on the second part of that, whatever I just said a second ago, no, I'm forgetting what I followed it up with, but yeah, mainly like just that the investor mindset. Like, what do you think it is? Because sometimes it's like a chicken and egg thing, and you coming obviously, Frank, from like TradFi and stuff like that, it's a little bit different mindset than in crypto, obviously.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with age, wisdom, experience, failure to understand what money is. That's the biggest one. People don't understand why Bitcoin was created. Then on top of that, you have people who saw what Bitcoin did, a decade ago, and then they wanted to recreate that as much as possible. All right. So when Bitcoin was created, people didn't understand why Bitcoin was created. They didn't understand the problem that we're solving. I actually took the weekend and I started listening to a bunch of Satoshi Nakamoto's tweets. And some people what they've done is that they've recorded his emails and major statements that he made when he was building Bitcoin, and they put it into a video format. So I spent a lot of the time this weekend trying to understand the mind of Satoshi Nakamoto. And his philosophy was solving the problem of the US monetary system. That was the thing that Bitcoin solved. That was what he was doing. No middleman, not having an individual control of or custody of funds in between transactions, not being able to double dip, right? So all of this is being verified in the blockchain. What is being sent is what's actually being sent. You have a bunch of nodes across the world that validate the system. Everything that the central bank is not. Let's put it that way. So people who understood Bitcoin at that time understood the problem that he was solving. They weren't concerned about what is this going to be worth later on. Of course, that was part of it. So basic supply and demand. You have a fixed supply and you have increased demand, price is going to go up. Any person with a basic bachelor's or macro degree is going to understand that. Satoshi was more than just a programmer. He understood the problem that money was, right? So as price started increasing, because many people early on started to understand the problem that it was solving based on the US monetary system, you have a whole bunch of retailers over here seeing, oh, they just saw the price go up. but they never understood the white paper. They never understood what Satoshi was doing. Okay, so when you have that, you have all these people chasing just a dollar sign, and then you have people just chasing very emotional to money. When you're very emotional to money, you don't understand what money is. Because I assure you, if you knew what money was the way that I knew what money was, you wouldn't value it, you wouldn't worship it, you wouldn't put it on a pedestal the way that most people do. Because it's literally just a piece of paper. It's not backed by anything, and we'll get into that in a second. So people put so much value into it, but because of they're not really, I don't believe that people are chasing the money. They are chasing the goods and services that they can buy with the money. So that's why they put so much emphasis on currency, right? So whenever you don't understand that, you have just a whole bunch of degenerate retailers coming into a space and trying to chase this new pump. And then on top of that, you have a bunch of people who are smart who said, you know what, I'm going to capitalize on this opportunity because crypto's the wild, wild west. I'm going to create this new crypto coin because there's no regulation. There's nobody who can stop me. There's no officers, officials. So they're going to create this coin, launch it with a whole bunch of VCs, a whole bunch of money. Then they're going to start marketing it. Nobody can punish them because there's no regulation behind it. And they weren't solving, or they weren't continuing the solution that Satoshi created. All they were doing was just grifters creating this new product where they knew they couldn't be punished. And then they started offloading those positions on retailers who didn't know shit about monetary policy, the monetary system, the vision that Satoshi had created. And then fast forward a decade later, you have a man like Richard Hart who says, no, the problem that Satoshi fixed was a legitimate solution. But everybody else in this space are grifters, and they're taking money from people. I'm going to give you the opportunity where we can create a better system of Bitcoin that's truly decentralized, that isn't controlled by centralized exchanges, that is not going to be manipulated by VCs, that's not going to be manipulated by individuals who have a board member, right? An entity that has a board member. And he says, I'm going to give the opportunity for the average investor to come in and say, you know what, believe in the vision that Satoshi created. I'm making it better, and come follow me to the promised land. That's what Richard Hart did. That's what Richard Hart did by creating PulseChain. That's what Richard Hart did by making a better version of Bitcoin, which was Hex. And then he made it an opportunity where you forked Uniswap. So know that now the individuals can capitalize on all the volume that's happening by owning a piece of the bank. That's how I see it whenever I own PulseX. Every person that transacts within the land of PulseChain has to go through that bank to swap their currency, whether it's from EUSDC to PulseChain, or from PulseChain to EUSDC or another stable. They have to go through that bank. There's no ownership of the bank, so who owns it? It's the individual who holds the tokens. I hold a lot of tokens on PulseX, so I'm the owner, right? On paper. That's how I see it. Because in theory, as more people use it, volume increases, then the demand is reduced. Over time, the people who hold that asset, their assets appreciate in value. And that's what people here don't understand. They're still chasing 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago what crypto did. They're not understanding the problem that Satoshi solved, and then they're not understanding the problem that Richard Hart made better of what Satoshi solved. To my knowledge, there's only been 2 people in crypto, maybe 3, that have done anything that's actually solving the problem of the monetary system. And that was Satoshi with Bitcoin, and then there was Richard Hart with PulseChain, Hex, and PulseX, and then Vitalik, who created the smart contracts. Vitalik created the platform so Richard Hart can do that in a proof of stake format rather than the proof of work format that Satoshi did. So it's more environmentally friendly. Basically, he took all the bad stuff of the environment that Bitcoin was being used to destroy, to validate those transactions, did it on the smart contract, and then Richard Hart kind of improved it from there. He took the vision from there. All right. And I actually had tweeted about something like that similar. And then somebody said, I made a comment that like Richard Hart is 10 years ahead. And then somebody said, okay, how is it 10 years ahead if he just copied a chain that was, a couple years old? And my response was, IBM was making computers decades before Apple came in. Doesn't mean that Steve Jobs didn't come in with a 10-year vision when he founded Apple. Mm-hmm. So just because the technology exists already doesn't mean you don't have a 10-year vision, right? And that's the problem that the majority of the retailers that are involved in the crypto space are experiencing. They value money because they worship it, because they think it's valid to something. They don't understand the problem of monetary policy and inflation and all these different things. They don't understand that Richard Hart is creating an opportunity for retailers to participate in the new monetary system. People don't value freedom because they're not free themselves, but there's going to be a day when they're restricted, right? So right now, you may not think it's important that you hold tokens that nobody can take away from you, because what you have to say, nobody cares about. But in the future, when you do have something to say and the government is restricting you, then you're going to value freedom. And then the people who hold those assets, those are the people that can speak freely because nobody can shut them down. So the way that I see it is, in the future, 15 years from now, when someone wants to say something freely, but they can't because they're restricted to government restrictions, and they need to have a type of monetary system which they can't be taken away, they have to come to me and buy it from me so they can speak freely, so they can move their money into this asset class where they can speak freely and spend freely. So the way that I see it is, I hold people's future freedoms in my hands. And that's what people don't understand.
I see. So I want to ask you this, because you keep coming back to this theme, which I love, is like, and I'm going to play devil's advocate. I'm going to play the role of, one of these more short-sighted investors we're talking about that is like, well, how come my bags haven't pumped yet? Like PulseChain's not pumping enough. Coming from that person's point of view, like, okay, Frank, everything you're saying is terrific. I'm bought in. I believe, I do believe in Richard Hart. He's got a 10-year plan, all these things. But why is Solana and Dog with Hat and all these memes and all these things popping up, and Pepe and like all these things that are kind of like capturing the crypto sphere by storm, and it's not coming into PulseChain yet? Why is that? Like, if it's so great, and if there's this long-term vision of people are going to value their privacy, when is that going to happen? Because I'm not seeing those returns yet. What do you say to that? Is it purely just the short-sighted nature of that investor? Or is it like maybe a minute few of us, really value what we have here in terms of free speech and freedom and things like that with this blockchain? But will anybody else ever value that? Or are they all destined to just, vote for the next Democrat or politician that's going to, spy on them through their cell phone the rest of their life and enjoy it? Yeah. So what do you make of that? What do you say to that devil's advocate? Like, okay, well, when are they coming? Like, when are the investors coming in this?
Well, I think you answered your own question, right? I think the market doesn't really, it reflects the majority. So if you see meme coins are pumping and you see that all these, shit coins are moving in a direction that, deep down, it shouldn't be moving upwards. It has no reason to. That gives you your answer that the people that are involved right now, or the people that reflects on the charts, are not knowledgeable people who understand DeFi. Crypto as a whole is already a casino. So that means in order for the real products like true DeFi, decentralized assets to pump, the majority of true believers who understand that problem have to overcome the retailers and the casino gamblers. That's not going to happen. Then that's not a competitive edge, because you have all the smart people that have overtaken retail. If PulseChain was the one that was pumping right now and meme coins weren't, that would just tell you that all the smart money is already in. So when are you going to exit? Or exit, right? Because I have no interest in exiting. But if the real assets were pumping, that means the smart money has discovered this is the real thing. Everything else is bullshit. I'm gonna move here. And that means that the market as a whole has more true investors and believers than retailers and gamblers. So that's why I don't worry, because as long as there's more retailers and gamblers, I still have a competitive edge. That means I'm still early. Right? So that's the biggest thing, is like the market doesn't lie. Because human psychology doesn't lie. People want to justify all those different things, like, why isn't this happening? The answer is really always in your face. If real DeFi assets are not pumping, it simply means that there's more retailers and gamblers and degenerates out there that don't know anything about monetary policy and monetary inflation, what is having a dollar pegged to gold standard, all that stuff of macroeconomics. That means that they don't know anything about that, and they're just looking for a quick buck. But with the moment that it shifts, it's the moment that smart money understands, hey, this is a real deal, right? And it could be, too, speculation that smart money is, I'm going to go make a bunch of money on meme coins, and then I'm going to rotate to the real thing, right? That's always a probability, too. But I don't really think about that, because the moment that I see the real assets pumping and then the meme coins are dying, that means the market sensitive has shifted, that the smart money has understood this is the real deal, everything else is bullshit. And your competitive edge is gone at that point, because you don't have more than maybe a 2x from there. And that's for the people that want to cash out, right? I can't really speak to that audience because I can't relate to them. I don't understand why someone wants to go take their US dollar, make a 10x, and then exit the very asset that's going to be here in the future to go back to a worthless currency. That to me doesn't make any sense to me, but I mean, that just goes to show you that people still value USD. I mean, I tweeted this the other day. The moment that I sell my PulseX back to go back to US dollar, it means that I value US dollar more than I value PulseX. And I can assure you, I don't value US dollar, because the US dollar is not backed by anything. And I'll give you an example too. Is it really the US dollar that people are chasing? I don't think so. Because in a country like El Salvador, you can get the same quality of life for 10 times cheaper. So when people say, I want to be a millionaire, they're not really chasing a millionaire status. They're chasing the quality of life that $1 million can buy them.
Right.
So whenever people are saying, I want $1 million, it's because in the United States, $1 million can get them a pretty good life. But in El Salvador, that same life you can get for 100,000. So is it really the money that you're chasing? No, you're chasing goods and services. And I think when you change your perspective of money and you stop worshiping it, like some sort of, worldly god, and then you understand why the US dollar has no value, then you start looking at things in a different perspective. And I'll give you an example. The US dollar currently is the world reserve currency of the world. Everybody else in other parts of the world, they go to US dollar to hedge against their currency. Right? So that's US dollar is their investment, because their currency is depreciating at a faster rate than you can blink. So they use US dollars to store their value. But people in the US, we're just like, we don't see it that way, because our currency is deflating at a rate where you only the people who understand that it's worth nothing, that they can see it. But the average person can't see it. The average person here in the US isn't going to have the same problems as the people in Colombia or Venezuela, wherever they have to spend their currency so quickly into food, because if they don't spend it, the next day is going to cost them 2 times more. So they quickly go to US dollars to hedge against that. But everybody's on the same boat. The only difference is the US dollar is sinking at a much slower rate, but it's still sinking.
Yeah.
Right. So then how is it possible in the gold standard, when President Nixon depegged it? Back then, $1 US equated to a certain amount of gold, so it was equally exchangeable. So the countries were able to transact freely, and they could always cash out their US dollar for amount of gold because it was pegged to it. Okay, when that depegging happening, everybody else lost hope in the US dollar because now you're printing too much, and then they can't cash out the same amount of US dollar for the equal amount of gold that was set. So when that happens, when you lose faith in the currency, well, how does the US dollar maintain its power? The US military. The US military is what backs the US dollar. So they use war and threats to basically say, you're going to have to use US dollar or we're going to stop defending whatever territory, or we're going to bomb you, or whatever it is that they're doing. They use control because they have to continue to print more money to keep up their Ponzi. That's the only way, because the US dollar is no longer pegged to anything. It's not collateralized. So if it's not collateralized to anything, it's backed by paper. So when people tell me, aren't you going to cash out your $2-3 million worth of PulseChain to go back into USD? For what? To go back to paper? What do I need to spend paper for? My job gives me paper. I take the money from my job. I use that to live. And then in excess, I'm hedging the fuck out of it.
Right.
And it's the same concept that people in Colombia and Venezuela do. The only difference is they don't have the luxury of a stock market. They don't have the luxury of all these different, certain types of securities and investments. They go to US dollar to hedge out. And that's where you have to extrapolate your viewpoint to understand what money really is. Sorry, I went on a rant there.
No, it's good because I think a lot of people can't understand that. Like you were talking about, like the thought of, I want to have $1 million or whatever. And it's like, well, no, you don't really want to have $1 million. You want to have a certain kind of quality of life. And in America, and that's ever changing, obviously, like you said, with the just flattening of USD, what that will actually be able to attain you. I want to ask you a question because we actually got this question because I don't know. I think maybe they're taking it a little bit too literal. I'm not sure, but I remember we got this question for you or about this stream when you talked about this subject last time about well, hey, I'm invested in PulseChain. I'm invested in PulseX. Why the hell would I cash out of those to go back to USD? There were some people that said specifically, so are you advocating for not selling anything at the top of the bull market or potentially riding something back down? I don't think this is going to happen with PulseChain or PulseX necessarily, but we saw EHEX, which is a unique scenario, go down over 99%. So people are like, are you really going to bag hold that all the way down? Now, Frank and other investors also may be in certain different positions than other investors that may have their life savings in crypto and not much else, or maybe don't make a lot of money at their day job or something like that. But it brings us to a couple points. Number one, if you would answer that person's question that I remember reading from last time, but also I think you tweeted also, Frank, about DeFi protocols like the Earn protocol and stuff like that, and ways to earn on a stable coin, or if somebody for whatever reason did want to go into USD in a bear market. So I know I'm kind of throwing a lot at you, but we did get that question I remember last time. So if you could kind of clarify that or help that person help that person understand a little bit more about you're not necessarily wanting to cash out into USD, but you also don't want to ride something down, 95% also, if you may have the foresight that may happen. So what are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I get a lot of comments on that too. And maybe I can only speak to a certain type of audience, people who are probably in similar financial positions that I am. My position in the real world is I have a job. It pays me very, very well. I can sustain myself. I don't need my investments. I don't need that. If you're an individual who works at McDonald's and is making 20,000, 25,000 a year.
That's everybody in the chat right now, by the way. I just
I mean, I'm gonna call you out. If that's you and you don't have plans to have a career or a business and you're looking at this for your exit, I can't help you. That's a gambler. You might as well go to Vegas, because that's not my level. My world is go get a job, 401k, 30 years out, you work your way up the corporate ladder. Somewhere along that line, maybe you want to start a business. That business produce more than your job. Cool. Very formal. That's the audience that I speak to. People who have a decent level of income or who are heading in that direction. All these individuals who want to skip that aspect of life, that's a delusional mindset. I can't help you. Because in life, you have to work, whether it's through a W-2, whether it's through a business. You have to give value to the economy so you can extract money from that same economy. If you want to skip that component, skip 10, 15 years, you are a delusional gambler. I can't help you. Nobody in this chat has gone through life not working, trying to find that golden ticket. And if you think you're so entitled and special, thinking that you're going to be the one that deserves that, I got some news for you. You're not going to. All right. So I can only speak on people who understand that in life, you have to give value to the world so you can extract money from that. And then what you do with that money once it's in your hands, that's up to you. But you should always be trying to aim and increasing your income, increasing that, whether that's through your job or from your business. And you increase your income by giving more value to the world. Because when you are extracting more, that means you have taken market share from someone else. If it's in your job, you got paid more. It's because you gave more value than the person who was competing for that same promotion. In a business, you're not creating something new. All you're doing is fighting to take market share from your competitors. So that's how you extrapolate money from the system. If you want to skip that 10, 15-year journey, don't listen to me. I don't know who you are. I'm not your guy for that, right? I speak on the people who have an income, who understand that in life you have to give value to extract it. And then what you do with that money once you extract it is how you escape the system that you're placed in to begin with, right? So to go back to answer the question is, they tell me all the time, oh, aren't you going to cash out at the top? First of all, if I was that fantastic of a trader, I wouldn't be worried. Right. So if I knew that, I would have been retired from stocks long ago.
Yeah.
Right. It's not that simple. Okay. I would have retired on FX. I would have retired on leverage trading. If I knew I was that good of a trader, and I've been trading for 5 years prior to this, and I was never very successful at it. If I knew that I can do that, I would do that. That's first thing. 2, even if I could time the perfect top, there's not enough liquidity, I can assure you, for me to extrapolate my whole bag without taking a massive hit. So I'm going to take a 30, 40, 50% haircut for what? To go back to worthless paper? So I lose half my net worth on slippage just to go back to paper. That sounds fantastic. I'm not doing that, right? So if that's why I say, like, have a job, have an income that provides your lifestyle. And if I need it, maybe I have a big purchase that I want to pay for in cash, and I don't want to go to traditional lending protocols. An example would be, I want to buy a $500,000 house, and instead of going to a bank to get a mortgage, I'll go to the Earn protocol, extract 500 cash, and then with the same income that I was going to pay off my mortgage, now I'm just paying it off at 0 interest, no terms, at my own time schedule. So I'm not the guy that's going to tell you, hey, this is your golden ticket. You don't have to work the rest of your life. You don't have to do. There's other people for that. That's not the audience that I speak to. I think that's a very delusional audience. I think that's very unrealistic. People who don't want to work a day in their life. Even YouTubers, like K4K, Matthew, Matt, Crypto Coffee, all these people, they make money by creating content, selling things of value, and extracting from the system. But even though they're retired, even though they were Hex OGs, they still have to create value so they can extract money from the economy. So even retired people have to continue to make an effort to generate an income. So all these individuals who think that they're entitled to skipping that aspect when you're a brokey and there's people who are millionaires who still have to work, I think that's a very entitled mindset. So part two to that would be, again, I don't want to take a hit on slippage. I don't want to have to live this fairy tale where I never have to work a day in my life. I think that's very miserable.
Yeah.
I don't, and I'm not a good trader. I don't know when the top is going to be. So all those things, it just makes it easier for me. If I take out 10-year perspective, yes, I'm going to take a 90% hit on my net worth. Did I need that money? No, I didn't need that money. So I don't really care. But then it's going to recover. And as I'm making more money from my job, I'm injecting more capital on those dips. That's who I speak to. Realistic individuals who have a wage job, who understand, yes, work is a part of life, but doesn't mean you have to be there forever. Right.
Well said. And I like your point too, and keep that question up, Ewok. Yeah, because I wanted to. I think that's a great place to go next. I just wanted to comment and say, like, I think a lot of people have that dream. You know, it's funny, Frank, because you're not, as you've mentioned, and you know, probably best for your mental health too. You're not like the most vocal guy on Twitter, certainly compared to like some of the people within the PulseChain ecosystem that may be constantly tweeting and stuff like that, or constantly talking about 10,000 X's all the time and stuff. But you do seem to get kind of a like, do you actually have a plan for all this? Or is this just kind of like, oh, give me my 10,000 X and I don't really care about these real DeFi principles or anything. Just why won't the price go up yet? And not to go back to what we were talking about earlier, but I think that is just so prevalent. And there's not a lot of people who, like you have said, understand what we have here, have that long-term vision, and really want to continue to add value to the world, even after they may have gotten their riches. Like Crypto Coffee, great example. Guy doesn't have to do anything, doesn't have to do any of this stuff at all, and is always the first person to have out like a new tutorial on a new protocol or a new platform that has come out, and just kills it all the time. So yeah, well said.
And I will add to that too. Most of those people that are looking for those type of gains, they will end up broke again. And that's the problem. Unfortunately, the ones with that lottery ticket mentality, they want to cash out. They'll end up back in the same spot as they were right before it happened again, and then they'll end up looking for it all over again. So it'll be very unfulfilling for them. It sucks. It's very cyclical, but you know, it is the degen mentality.
Okay. There's a few things I want to touch on. That question, as far as I'm gonna put it very, very simple. Supply and demand, macroeconomics. You have increase in demand, you have the reduction in supply, and then price goes up. You over a long enough time period, math is always going to be math. And macroeconomics and the basic principles of macroeconomics are always going to be there. So let's take things that are never going to change, at least in the near lifetime. The US, as far as right now, is going to continue to print more money. That's always going to happen because they're backing that printing with the US military. So they're going to maintain that power. And the people at the top, they benefit from all that printing because their assets appreciate. All their stocks, all their real estate, it goes up in value. They don't want to give that up. So the people at the bottom is the one that's hurting because now the price of eggs goes up 3 times, right? They don't care about that. Their assets are going up 4 or 5 times. So printing is always going to be there. You have increase in money supply. Then you have PulseX that has a constant buy and burn, which is constant reduction in supply. So you increase the money supply into an asset that is being deflationary every single day. On the basic rules of economics, when you have a reduction in supply and an increase in supply, price goes up. That's all I'm going to say about that. So the question that you have to ask yourself is, do you see over the next 5 to 10 years a possibility, more of a probability, that the volume in PulseChain is going to go up, or do you think it's going to die down? If you think it's going to die down, you're in the wrong place, you're in the wrong community. Why are you thinking 5-10 years out? If you think it's going to go up because more adoption, more people are going to come in, lower gas fees, people are going to be able to build, and over the next 5 years, there's going to be more people coming in. You have, which means more people coming in, which means more money's coming in, and you have constant money printing. So you have constant injection of capital, buying assets that are reducing their supply. That's going to go up. Right? Basic principles of economics. You have to ask that question. What is it? What is your belief based on the research that you've done? Do you believe that we're going to have increase in demand in people? Or do you think that this is going to become a ghost chain and nobody's going to want it in 5-10 years? You take your bet.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cody Polly, for the 1999 super chat. We appreciate it.
You go ahead and read that if you want to, because it does. It's a good example of kind of some of the mindsets we were
Absolutely. He says make $250,000 a year in California. Well, that's problem number one. But anyway, after taxes, family health care, 401k, it's like $174,000 a year. After mortgage, necessities, I'm broke. RH, I pray to pay off house and retire to my passion.
So let me speak on that type of audience, right? Because I feel like a lot of people attack me from that perspective.
Which, by the way, why are you giving us $20, Cody Polly? You save that money.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead, Frank.
Let me speak to that type of audience. What's your other choice? Right? If you have $1,000 left over after all your expenses, your only other choice is real estate or stocks. That's all you have left. So the only solution to that problem is, one, you have to reduce your expenses to increase your cash flow to move that excess cash into deflationary assets. That's number one. Or you increase your income. Or two, you find a side hustle in which you can increase the game when you're broke is very, very simple, because I've been there. I was the guy making 35 a year and I had to spend 33 to live. Right? So the game becomes very, very simple when you're broke. It's spreading that income and the outcome. And then that difference is what helps you escape the miserable rat race that you're going to continue to be living in if you don't take action.
Yep.
So when I was broke, making 35 a year, working 40 hours a week, and I had a whole bunch of debt, I went to go do Uber for another 30. So now that increased my net income, my spread by another $2,000. And then that $2,000 was what I was using to start businesses or to do whatever my journey, right, of learning during that time. I'm telling you, skip all that bullshit. Just take that 2,000 into these types of assets that you believe in. And in 10 years, you're going to be okay. But people come to me like, I have this problem. I can't fix your problem. Only you can fix your problem. Because everybody at one point is broke. And the only way you fix that is by increasing that spread. And you increase that spread by reducing your expenses or increasing your income or a combination of both. And then that excess that you don't think it's a lot, that's what helps you escape that miserable rat race by moving it into outside of US dollar, by moving it into assets that are a hedge against US dollar. That's how you escape that. But that's where it comes like self-action. I can talk about it for days, but people, if they don't understand that concept of life, they're just going to be continuous cycle, making 200, 300, 400,000, spending 200, 300, 400,000.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that. Somebody once told me that for the majority of most people, the best financial shape they were in was when they were 18 and they just graduated high school and they were just broke. They weren't in debt. They were just broke. But as you go through life, you become more in debt and broke. So being of that stature, just 18 years old and just broke, that's the best for a lot of people that it gets. And unfortunately, that's true.
And I'll say, going back to Cody Polly too, because Frank, you mentioned like that, that you have to decrease or increase, I should say, I guess, that spread, like whether it is your expenses or if you're starting a side hustle or something. Part of my motivation when I first started this channel was about taking on a minimalist lifestyle if you are in that scenario. And I assure you, and I know it's much harder, Cody Pauly, if you've got a family and stuff like that, or if it's not just you and everything. But you know, a big problem in this country of the many is that people have the keeping up with the Joneses thing, and they just are so ashamed of even, well, I just get that iced latte when I go to work in the morning. That's just what I do. I understand like a $5 or $6 cup of coffee alone isn't going to make you rich or something like that, but I'm saying a bunch of these kind of decisions, whether it be selling a car you don't really need and getting something that's fuel efficient. I talk all the time about rice and beans. I mean, like, seriously, like you can make, with lentils and stuff like that, dinner for like 50 cents every single night. There's so many things that you can do. And I don't think it's that people don't know how to do them. I think it's that they have this shame or embarrassment attachment to like, I'm not going to do that. Well, it's like, okay, well, have fun on your way to the poorhouse then. Dave Ramsey, for as much shit as he gets, and we make fun of him sometimes too, but that thing that he says, you have to live like no one else now so you can live like no one else later. I think he totally hits home with that. Like you have to not worry about what other people think and make those adjustments in your life. So I'm not necessarily saying that you have or haven't done that, Cody Pauly, but I mean, screw what other people think. And, like Frank talked about with like Ubering or whatever it is, don't worry about being embarrassed and keeping up with people. Like you can make adjustments like that and get to where you need to be. So.
Yeah, and you know what? Let me add on top of that, because the majority of people that I get and give me criticism is people in that situation, right? And I don't want this to turn into some personal finance type of podcast, because it's a crypto podcast. But the argument that I'm making is you have to understand that personal finance component is a part of crypto.
Yeah,
crypto is meant for you to escape that rat race.
Yeah.
And the hardest part in escaping that miserable rat race that people talk about is when you're broke or you're living paycheck to paycheck. Because if you don't understand that spread between your income and what you expend out is your freedom. That's your freedom. That's what you have to take your excess and move it outside of US dollar, outside of the things that you need. That's setting your future up 10 years in the future. That spread is the most valuable thing when you're broke. You want to increase that spread as much as possible, because of the more you spread and the more you invest, right, into crypto, to DeFi assets, it's what sets up your future. So this isn't a personal finance thing. No. Crypto, real crypto, is supposed to be a hedge against US dollar. So why you want to increase that spread on your US dollar to move it outside of it as much as possible? Because as of right now, we can't spend our HEX. We can't spend our PulseChain. We can't spend our PulseX. We have to spend it in USD. So spend as much of it as you need, and then take that rest of it and get it out of it. Get it out of that deflationary asset, as much deflationary paper or inflationary paper, that worthless piece of paper, and move it into deflationary assets. Because in the future, that is your hedge against that worthless piece of paper. And then what you'll notice is that over time, that spread between being broke and slowly becoming wealthy starts to slowly creep in. It may take 5 years, 6, 7, 8 years, right? 10 years, you'll see it.
Yep.
Okay. And that's the audience that I speak to, because the people who don't want to work, I can't help you. Go to Vegas, go take your $5,000 that you have in savings and go try to make whatever, $500,000 and leave this country if that's what you want to do. I can't speak to you, because I don't know what that type of mindset and lifestyle it is. Right. So I hope a lot of people understand that it's much more than, speculation. It's much more than just get rich, get quick, get rich scheme, or whatever people want to call it, or this is much more than just a meme coin. All the stuff that we talked about tonight ties back to Satoshi's vision, how the US dollar is worth nothing, how Richard Hart came and said, I'm gonna solve that problem, make it better. I'm going to give the average person who has nothing the opportunity to come in, even if it's $50, $100 a month, to carry on that same vision that Satoshi had, to help you get out of an inflationary piece of paper into an asset that is a hedge against that. And then in the future, maybe you have the freedom to choose what you want to do. That's the beautiful thing about having wealth. Being wealthy, it's not about all the cars and the houses and the women. It's about the freedom to choose whether you want to choose to start a business because you have the capital to do so, whether it's to choose to go work at a job because you love it, whether it's to choose that you want to go retire at a beach and never work a day in your life because you can live off of the constant appreciation from your assets. That's up to you as an individual to do what you want to do. But you'll never get there unless you understand from the very beginning BTC, Satoshi, his vision, monetary policy, the monetary system, what Richard Hart is doing, what Richard Hart is doing right now to save crypto as a whole. Unless you understand all of that, you cannot have the vision of 10, 15 years.
Well said.
Time is your
Rolando.
friend.
Rolando makes a good point here. Ever since I got into crypto, I started becoming more frugal and offering crypto as a payment in and out, aka move away from the dollar. I mean, a good way to think of it too, and I've heard other people say this, and it's funny, these are even people that are well off because it's just having the right mental makeup. But like if you think about like if there's some like $150 item that you want to buy that like you could use, you're like, oh, it's a new blender, and how much joy or whatever would this thing buy me or whatever, versus like 30x that in your mind, or even 10x it, whatever, 20x it, 30x it, whatever you want to think of by putting it into PulseChain for whatever time horizon you want to, and just think about where else that money could go, and I think it can make you start making better decisions like in your personal life and things like that.
Yeah, and I kind of want to touch on that too. This is the last thing I was going to say is
sure.
A lot of people, they don't like the idea of frugality, right? They talk about, oh, crypto's the way to 150x, 200x, 300x, and they don't have to worry about a $6 latte, or they don't have to worry about a $15,000 car, or they don't have to worry about a blender. But what they fail to understand is you don't get to that point unless you take care of the little things in the beginning. You cut out the $6 latte, so now you have $1,000, $500 in your excess that you can move it to real DeFi assets. So people want to skip the whole beginning that's boring, the personal finance component, and they want to go straight to the 1 million, 2 million, $3 million net worth. I tell you one thing right now, I put a substantial amount of capital and maybe $3 million net worth this cycle. For people to come to me, they put more money than me in DCA, highly unlikely. So they want to skip all of the little things in the beginning, and they want to go straight to that $1 million, $2 million, $3 million net worth, not knowing that the only way you get there is by doing those sacrifices at the beginning. And then that's where I combine with, you have to see the whole picture, not just focus on one component, right? And yes, crypto, part of it is the personal finance component. Doing what that gentleman just said, being more frugal, accepting BTC or whatever as form of payment, taking that money, moving it out of US dollar, and then setting your future up. And then that's how you get to the life of prosperity, peace, freedom. Freedom is choosing what you want to do, right? Freedom is not necessarily money. So,
yeah, well said. And I think people get it so backwards all the time, where they get themselves into these life predicaments of, choosing the easy way out, which ends up being where you can never have freedom, and you just, get with the wrong woman, some hometown chick that you settle down with, pop out a couple of kids, go get a job at the factory, and it's like your life has just totally gotten away from you at this point. And now you're working for the man, and freedom is just something you can't have anymore. And we really need to be. I'm glad we had this conversation tonight about personal finance, because how many times Ewok talked about it earlier, like people with that mindset, even if they get that money, they'll lose it. How many times have we seen NFL stars, NBA stars, whatever different sport, that just cash in on a big signing bonus and their life is just totally ruined and they're like out of the league in a couple of years,
Or even lottery winners, same thing.
Yeah.
That's the answer right there. That money is not the freedom that it comes with. Freedom is the knowledge and then the habits that you built up. That's what freedom is. A lot of people, these NFL players, these lottery ticket winners, they'll go from 0 to 5 million, but they never learn the principles that got them there, got them to that money. And if you as an individual do not learn those principles, learn it early on, even if you get lucky and you cash out at the top and you're able to cash out $2 million, you would lose that. I promise you. Money always goes back to the hands of those who understand it. Always. That's why when people say, "Oh, we could just print billions of dollars and give it to individuals as stimulus," it's literally what happened freaking 2020.
Mm-hmm.
They printed a whole bunch of money. It went to the brokies, and then those brokies spend it on the very same assets that appreciate the stocks that the wealthy own. It always goes back to the wealthy.
Yep.
So take those lessons and understand that you want to extract money from the system, from your job, from your business, give value, spend on your life, whatever that may be, and that excess is your freedom. You move it over out of USD into appreciation assets. For me, I'm 99% PulseX. For you, it may be something else. Whatever that is to you, this is a crypto podcast, so I'm going to speak on behalf that 99% of my net worth and whatever excess cash that I have from my income goes into PulseX, because I've done the research, I've done the time, I understand that what money is and what money is not, and I understand that over time, due to supply and demand, the price of PulseX is a higher probability that it's going to go up rather than a higher probability that it's going to go down. That is the bet that I am making on myself and my decisions. People have to come to that conviction and whatever it is it's decide to put their money into.
And we can let you go after this if you're up on time, but that's a fascinating thing about PulseX too, is like, for as much as people, and I'm not saying they're wrong or anything, but as much as people are like so bullish on exactly like, we'll do a 10,000x this cycle, and again, the short-sighted thinking, it says something too, that even though PulseX is programmed for all these gains and the buy and burn and all that stuff, it also is actually a very conservative investment in your eyes. And what I mean by that is just that, like, you have no qualms about dumping everything into PulseX, so the fact that, I shouldn't say fact, but the idea that we could have such outsized gains from it over time, but it's also, you can sleep, easily at night knowing how much you're pouring into it. Where do you find that? You know what I mean? That's just not that's just not something that's out there.
Yeah, honestly, I actually wouldn't prefer that we did a 10,000x, and I'll tell you why.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that goes up way too fast comes down just as quick. So
that's what happened with Hex.
It's exactly what happened. Exactly. So I like the staircase approach, because I know that, where do I get my conviction? Like, I can comfortably sleep at a 90% drop. Well, because I know that that 90% drop is still much more than the worthless currency that USD is.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where my conviction comes from. If I have, I don't know, $3 million net worth and it drops to 300,000, that 300,000 is still worth more than the inflationary paper had I just left it in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that eventually that's going to recover. right? It's going to take some time, maybe a year or 2 years after the bottom hits, but it's going to recover. But that is designed to be the hedge against the worthless piece of paper that USD, that what my job pays me in, what everybody's job pays you in, right? So that's where my conviction comes in. That's why I'm not afraid of 90% drops, because I know that even at a 90% drop, that asset is worth more than the paper that is transacted in the economy. Okay. And then part two, it's the whole concept of, yes, 10,000x. That's relevant for someone who wants to cash out and then go back to USD. But that just tells me that they're a gambler, or they don't value, real assets. They're trying to escape crypto. Maybe they're trying to get out of the game. They're trying to do whatever it is. But the point is that they value USD more than long-term store value. And that's what I see with PulseChain, Hex, and PulseX, is that it's not just a hedge against the US dollar. It's where I'm going to store my lifetime's wealth. Right. And I think a lot of people don't see that. Back, 60, 70 years ago, that concept was real estate and stocks. They worked every single day. They went to work and then they stored their wealth in those assets. To me, it's the same principles. The only difference is I'm storing it into modern technology that isn't probably as, popular as stocks and real estate. That's the only difference. But why do I not fear it? Well, because I put the time to understand it. But more importantly, I took to understand what money wasn't. That's the most important thing. Money isn't a store of value. USD isn't a store of value. USD is just a form to transact with one another. But true store of value is anything that's a hedge against the dollar. Right. So then that's how I can sleep at night peacefully, knowing that there's a 60, 70% drop, because even those 60, 70% drops are going to be worth more than the inflationary paper. And then two, that massive run up, I mean, it's just going to come down just as fast. And I think that's going to hurt a lot of people financially, because they're going to have certain expectations, or, they're whatever it may be. And I think it's just going to create a massive divide on, oh, this is a scam, this is blah, 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 blah. And they never actually learned what they were holding. They were just speculating. Now, yeah, I mean, great. If it does a 10,000x, I mean, I'm not going to complain. But someone like me, who has such a long-term vision and who thinks of lifetime store value, even extracting all of that at once would be very questionable to me, because I would just be going back to paper. And yeah, you can make the argument, oh, you can sell at the top and then rebuy at the bottom. Man, that's trading. I'm not a trader. I can never time that perfectly. I'll end up losing money. So that's why, it's better for me to just sit back, relax. Whatever happens, happens. Think 10 years out, and in 10 years out, my bet is that it's going to be higher than it is today. And then if I need it, I'll tap into it. And if I need it immediately, I will use DeFi protocols to loan against it, right? And go about my life that way. And I think a lot of people who think that way, or a lot of people who listen to this, they're like, that's boring. Why would I want to do that? That sounds blah, blah, whatever it is that I can't really talk to them, because I can't relate to their mindset, So I speak to a very niche type of individual, and I think the type of people that I speak to is very mature. They understand the realities of life. They understand what money is not. And they understand that, okay, if money's fake, I have to work anyway. I might as well move it into this. I might as well move my excess cash into this asset that's going to be a long-term store of value. That's going to be a hedge against the dollar. And then they go about their life. They have their family, they have their kids, and then they use their USD to transact in that life. But they're building their wealth over here with these DeFi assets that Richard Hart gifted us with.
Yeah, it's a good place to be, and especially with PulseX. I mean, one of the beautiful things, like the people that do get a little bit shaken up by the dips, or just the bull market not popping off yet, is just seeing that buy and burn constantly ticking up. Like, it's cool to be able to check that percentage. As last time I looked, I mean, we're getting near 4% as far as the buy and burn right now. So it is cool to see that. And it's always good, and it calms people down, I think, to look at little indicators like that and just think about things again in matters of time, not so much price and where the price is right now. So you always set people straight, I think, Frank. And something that another good thing for everybody to do is like really take stock of what kind of investor or what mindset actually works for you. Like Frank said, like maybe we know that 0.02% of the population are maybe effective traders out there, even maybe if it is long-term trading, like he mentioned too. But whatever speaks to your mind is probably going to be the best for you to invest. If you are more of a gambler, if that's what you want to do, and that's something that you could be effective at, go ahead and do it. But for the most, I think I'm speaking for most people, though, overwhelmingly, it's going to be us longer term holding, like Frank's talking about here. So, is there anything else you wanted to add tonight, Frank? Any other topics you wanted to go over? It's been a great conversation.
No, I think that's pretty good. We'll see how people react to this one. This one was probably not as opium as some people would like, but it's a realistic component of it. So
I think it's going to get an overwhelmingly good response because you mentioned the word niche a minute ago, and we don't get a lot of this conversation, and I value this anytime I can find it, especially in the crypto space, because you just don't see that very often. So yeah, I tell you what, man, if you wanted to, Ewok, maybe we could just quickly cover some of the Richard Hart motion to dismiss stuff against the SEC that we saw came out today. Frank, sure. If you want to be bored to tears, Frank, you're welcome to stay. But if you need to drop off, that's what we're going to do next. So it's up to you.
That's fine. I'll let you guys finish your show. I have to get going, but it was awesome to be here. We'll do it again, maybe in a few weeks or months from now, and we'll see what else is out there during that time.
Sounds
you
good.
You have a warm seat ready for you on this show anytime, Frank.
Well, as many of the people in the chat have said, there's always a Creative Crypto dip on Tuesday nights, so now's a pretty good chance to take a little stab at it.
Yeah, scoop up some of these prices right now.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me on. Y'all have a great night,
Frank.
We'll talk to you soon, man. Take care.
Bye.
Fantastic. Another great conversation with Frank Molina. So I hope you guys all enjoyed that. We're up against the time where we usually wrap things up. We'll try to quickly get through some of the stuff with Richard Hart's 11 attorneys filing the motion to dismiss against the corrupt and incompetent SEC today. And boy, it is a doozy. We're not going to be able to get into this anywhere near the depth that we typically would, so we'll probably revisit it again next week. If you guys enjoyed the Frank interview, people are shouting out Frank in the chat. Do us a favor, hit the like, support the channel. We appreciate all you guys being here. Ewok, where do you want to go with this first? Because I don't want to be here forever tonight. We got things to do in the morning, but where do you want to attack this from first? Because we've got the whole nice 69-page motion to dismiss. 13 pages of it are a table of contents. Let me know where you'd like to go first. We can look at the preliminary stuff, or we could look at nuclear herbs summarization. Where would you like to go?
Why don't we just hit the Richard Hart tweet with the there was 4 windows there, basically the preliminary statement, things like that. We'll just cover it and kind of, because there's I think there's 5 points on there, right?
Yeah, I can do that. I have
hit those quickly, and
instead of bringing up the Richard Hart tweet, let me send you the actual link to the document, or well, you probably have it. Okay,
I have it here. I'm about to share it.
So we'll do this.
It's hard to read though. That's the problem.
You can probably can you. Well, I have the actual link to the thing, so you don't have to zoom in on Twitter. Like I have the actual link to the document instead of having to be on Twitter.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I have it too, I think, here.
And that should allow you to
The
zoom in.
memorandum one?
Yeah. The actual memorandum, yeah.
Yeah, I have it.
And we won't read this verbatim, but I think we can get a really good feel of like where RH's attorneys are going with this, with these 5 points. So essentially just kind of looking at a recap of the first thing they said. So in this civil enforcement action, the SEC seeks to further cement a role it has assumed for itself as the global governor of blockchain technology, a role exceeding both the agency's limited mandate and the bounds of personal jurisdiction. The SEC is suing Richard Hart, who lives in a foreign country, and somehow they're suing 3 blockchain software programs, Hex, PulseChain, and PulseX, which the SEC claims to be unincorporated alter egos of Mr. Hart. These open source communication technologies are used and enjoyed by a decentralized community of thousands of people across the world. Yet the SEC says that they violated U.S. securities laws by offering and selling the SEC's novel construction dubs crypto asset securities. So let's get to the first point that they're really arguing here. And again, this is the motion to dismiss. So this would be like if the judge would take a look at this and find that these complaints by the SEC are just that ridiculous that they would dismiss it. None of us, and I'll just say this now, Ewok nor I think that we're going to get like some kind of total dismissal from this and the case goes away. We talked about this last week. I think that's probably an asinine proposition and people should prepare that that's not going to be the case. That said, this kind of gives you an idea of where his attorneys are coming from and how strong they are positioned for this case. But the first point is that the lawsuit cannot escape the starting gate because exercising personal jurisdiction over Richard Hart in this case would not comport with due process. Mr. Hart lives abroad and is not alleged to have set foot in the United States during the relevant period, nor is he alleged to have engaged in any conduct directed at the United States. The SEC alleges no U.S.-based entities, employees, contracts, payment accounts, blah, 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 or travel associated with Mr. Hart. The general availability of Mr. Hart's speech on the internet and the alleged presence of some unquantified number of participants in the United States cannot satisfy the requirements for asserting personal jurisdiction because the defendant himself must purposefully reach out and establish sufficient minimum contacts with the U.S. So there's more there. But Ewok, we've talked about this point many times. The SEC try to throw at the wall that like, well, some of the Hex transactions, they occur on Uniswap, and at least one developer of Uniswap is located in the Southern District of New York, and at least one Hex investor. It's like, okay, well, that may be true of Omaha, Nebraska as well. So,
Right.
what gives this to you? So, what do you make of this first point here? I mean, they've always gone after it.
Yeah, jurisdiction, I think, is one of their. I mean, they made it point number one for a reason. I think it's one of the strongest legs they have to stand on. You and I were talking about this afternoon, and I wondered, because they don't have jurisdiction, is he still protected, or I guess the blockchain is the blockchain, right? That's the argument of it being protected by the First Amendment, which blockchain is freedom of speech. But I guess my question to you, and I will throw it out to the chat and see what they say, but because they are out of jurisdiction, is he still protected by the Constitution at all? Does the Constitution protect people that are foreign to the United States? I wondered how much that can play into, you're either going to say, you're out of our jurisdiction, and then this stuff doesn't really mean a whole lot, or you aren't, and then you can use the Constitution, the First Amendment, freedom of speech, things like that, in your favor. And that was my question to you this afternoon. I think I mentioned it, and I was like, just confused about it a little bit. I don't know if it really covers him at all. But again, it is the strongest argument that they have, even according to Nuclear Herbs. It's one of the ones that they, feel the strongest about, that, could get some of this dismissed. I do believe that a few of these things will be dismissed, but I still think the judge will want to hear both sides, and as far as some of the other things, like being maybe a security, as far as Hex. But there was a lot of planning that went into that to kind of fail the Howey test on purpose.
Right.
And once that education kind of happens, so this is what I'm personally hoping for, is there's several dismissals, several of the the illegitimate funds that were spent or whatever with the whole time machine things, which we'll get to that too, um, and some of the entity, like where they said they can't go after the entity. There is nobody there. Like, you can't
Right.
call something to court who can't defend themselves, and that's what essentially they are. So those couple things I do believe will get dismissed, but I think some of this will hang up and drag out for quite some time, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we've talked about that possibility that maybe the new stuff, PulseChain, PulseX, and stuff like that, could skate here, with this kind of faulty lawsuit, but that maybe eHex could end up being the lame duck. There was speculation about that because of RH with his tweet before, and the fact that eHex was already around. And will the judge decide that that the SEC has any grounds on that point? So.
Right.
Hex
Couple
Girl,
comments. Yeah,
go ahead.
Richard
Yep.
is still a U.S. citizen, so the Constitution would apply to him unless he gave up his citizenship. And Rolando says the SEC is bound to freedom of speech law. Code is protected by freedom of speech. So,
Okay.
yeah, I wasn't necessarily talking about the code or the blockchain,
Right.
because that would be covered no matter where it was. Obviously, it's in the United States, so that would be covered by freedom of speech. I'm more pointing to Richard at this point, though, and I do agree with Hexgirl that he is still a citizen. So
Yeah.
I just didn't know. Yeah, I don't know if he gave up citizenship or not. I doubt it, but I don't know for sure.
Well, let's go to the second point here. So they say the SEC has not plausibly alleged a domestic securities transaction. The Supreme Court has held that the securities laws generally do not apply extraterritorially. This action exemplifies the SEC's disregard for that principle. Congress has not established the SEC as a global blockchain regulator, but the SEC in the case and others operates as if it has. The SEC's total failure to come up with and this is a common theme as Nuclear Herbs tweeted about later, the SEC's total failure to come up with allegations supporting domestic securities transactions, notwithstanding the agency's sweeping investigative powers, dooms every claim. Separately, the predominantly foreign nature of the alleged transactions precludes application of the securities laws to any domestic transactions that the SEC could theoretically identify. So, Nuclear Herbs mentioned, and one of the things he's a huge fan of as he's gone through this document is just how many times RH's attorneys talk about that the SEC came up with allegations. They fail to come up with any allegations supporting anything that they have. They don't have anything to support their allegations. But yeah, what do you make of this point overall?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'll go with Nuclear Herbs. They're basically saying here that they've got nothing. They haven't come up with anything. And the other one is the disregard for principle. It says because they have never even been established as a blockchain regulator,
right?
But they're trying to operate as if they were. This goes back to what was it, the Coinbase trial, when the judge was kind of like, I'm not even sure I should be hearing this because you don't belong here.
Who are you? Yeah.
Who are you to decide this? This is Congress that should be deciding, who's going to regulate this. And so I kind of head back to that point of view. Hopefully this judge sees it in a very similar light. So that's my take on that one. There isn't a whole lot to it other than saying, guys, you haven't proven anything.
And who, you're not elected, nobody appointed you to do this. You've just kind of begun saying these things and literally not proving any of them. I mean, they have not successfully gotten anything to be classified as a security. It's all fun and games to like go out and just, this is a security, and wave your finger around. But I mean, nobody actually recognizes it as such. So, and actually, as we all know, there's video of Gary Gensler specifically affirming that Ethereum is not a security. So, just depends on if he's teaching at MIT or heading up some, ridiculous agency like the SEC.
Right.
The third thing, the SEC fails to satisfy basic pleading requirements for its securities fraud scheme claim against PulseChain. The complaint must spell out with particularly the circumstances of the fraudulent scheme and allege facts raising a strong inference of fraudulent intent, but it alleges no deceptive conduct at all, nor any statement that was false or misleading. On the contrary, statements incorporated by reference into the complaint demonstrate Mr. Hart's consistent candor. The SEC cannot sneak its fraud claim past dismissal by claiming that individuals supposedly had reasonable expectations about the use of alleged PulseChain assets, when the complaint and the disclosures incorporated therein make clear that no such expectations were ever set. The SEC may disfavor Mr. Hart's messages, but that does not make it fraud.
Right.
So go ahead.
Well, so this one, when you go to the actual the
Section
memorandum, the section on this one, they go really into this, and how many times that Richard said the rules: when you sacrifice, you will have no expectation. You will lose your coins; they are gone. You can't expect any profit from them. The addresses may be favorable to an airdrop of coins with no value, but because the sacrifice happened, the launch happened, all promises, and the only promises that there were would be that you're sacrificing for freedom of speech and that he was building a blockchain. That's pretty much it, and it will launch. So that alone, because it launched, because they were given out at zero value, just like they said, those were really the only promises that were made, and they were fulfilled. So it goes into that a lot in this section, and I mean, there were no claims, and if people thought there were expectations, then they didn't read the website, they didn't listen to any of the videos, they didn't, it was clearly stated many times over and over. The verbiage was very intentional, over and over again, about having no expectations, and that you shouldn't expect anything, and when you sacrifice, it's gone. You shouldn't worry about what happens to it after that. So
Yep, totally agree. And Richard clearly made that message clear the entire time. The fourth point, the SEC has not plausibly alleged that the 3 software programs at issue constitute investment contracts subject to the federal securities laws. The SEC fails to allege any contract at all, let alone an investment contract. Unlike in other recent cases involving digital assets, the SEC here does not allege any advertised plans for using participants' digital assets to develop new technologies, instead principally relying on functions built onto the software, along with the hypothetical expectations posited by the SEC that run counter to the alleged facts. Resorting to Mr. Hart's descriptions of how the software programs work, his design intentions for the programs, or what their associated tokens might be worth does not make up for the fatal absence of any alleged efforts beyond those of the individual users who execute the software. I think this is a really good one. Because, and again, we're continuing to see fails to allege. The SEC fails to allege any contract at all, alone an investment contract. Comparing
fatal absence of alleged efforts,
yes.
wording like that.
And they even kind of intimate here what Richard Hart did today and others about like how important this case is, because essentially dumbing it down TLDR that he has more of a case than any suit that the SEC has brought against anybody, really. And that's why this one's so important for precedent setting, and why other people, big channels, need to be covering it, and hopefully they will soon. But what do you make of these points?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we just look at Hex first, and the only thing is software that somebody runs. They have to run it. They have to press the button. They have to mint the new coins. There is no contract. The only contract is a smart contract that you run yourself. You're only making a contract with yourself. It's not an investment contract. The programs are, and especially because that one is finished. It's locked code. Like nothing can be changed about it. So there can't be expectations of anything to come, or improvements along the way. You can't really. Well, I don't even really want to go there with PulseChain, because there are going to be upgrades and things like that. But it's different. It's not really a investment contract. Again, these are all DeFi. You're not making a contract with anything when you purchase or swap in or out of any of these. So, yeah, they
Mhm.
again, the wording here is more important than anything. I think the fatal absence of any alleged efforts beyond those of the individuals who execute the software. That's it.
Right.
There's people executing software. That's all there is to it. It's not a contract. That's all it is. So hopefully they get that last sentence is highlighted in
Mhm.
flashing lights and blinking and all the
Yeah.
above.
Definitely. Their fifth and final point here. So, fifth, the SEC's case amounts to an unconstitutional infringement on the First Amendment guarantees of freedom of speech and association for Mr. Hart and those who execute the Hex, PulseChain, and PulseX software programs. The complaint reads as a selective review by a disgruntled critic of hundreds of hours of Mr. Hart's public speech about blockchain technologies. The SEC seeks to recast Mr. Hart's live commentary into securities offerings and therefore penalize him for expressing his views about the technologies and their potential. This action also threatens to stifle protected speech uttered on the blockchain, including the computer code underlying software programs that the SEC aims to shut down, along with the free expression of thousands of people across the world who have etched their beliefs into the immutable digital ledger created by the software. So
Yeah.
this goes back to the thing we already talked about, like the freedom of speech and First Amendment.
Yep.
Do you have any additional thoughts on this?
Not much. Yeah, I mean that pretty much says it right along. They're trying to shut something down that can't be software on the blockchain. So yeah, no, there's not a whole lot to say about this one. It's just that goes back to the freedom of speech thing. So yeah, they pretty much covered it.
And that's where, I always wonder how it will be for a judge. Like, how tough will it be for a judge for them to explain how blockchain is free speech?
Right.
I think that that's something that, um, the burden, I guess, isn't necessarily on them. But I mean,
Right.
it's going to help them to be able to show how blockchain is free speech.
And I think this is one of the things that will not get dismissed, like this portion of it, but probably one of the most important moving forward. Like I said, to set precedent for other cases that come about. If this section, gets ruled in our favor, this could be huge precedent for a lot of things moving forward. And Richard's right. It's got to have more eyes on it. People need to be really invested in this ruling alone, this part here. So,
yeah. Do you want to wrap up with, I'll just say, the Nuclear Herbs tweet real quick? He kind of comprehensively went over everything real quick in a tweet. If
the
you want to
most
pull that
recent
up.
one,
The one you sent me before we went on the air, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
bookmarked here. Hang on.
So just to kind of get Nuclear Herbs, and if you are new to this or you're not familiar with him, he's an attorney out in Arizona that has done a lot of work. He's in his 50s now, and I think retired from it. But he's been following this for quite some time, and he has great analysis on everything that goes on in this case. But so he says, after reading this memorandum, that taking a short break from more detailed read of the motion, and figured I'd share something. He says, I've read probably thousands of briefs in my life. Most are decent. I've read some that I'm convinced were written by coked up chihuahuas running across keyboards. Very few are very high quality. This is one of the best I've seen ever. Richard got every cent of his money's worth of this team, and this team definitely earned it. Like a great boxer, it throws only the punches it needs to, connects on all of them, and then moves out of harm's way to set up the next combination. It's literally art. That's cool to see, and stuff that we wouldn't be able to detect. Yeah, like an attorney may be able to. He says, if you're not a lawyer, you might not notice certain things about the way the brief is written. I'm sure many of you out there write code and can tell the difference between code that sucks, code that works fine but could be better, and code that's absolutely top end. But if you don't, code, you don't understand the difference. Same with legal briefs. For one thing, not a word was wasted. Everything in it has specific purpose and pushes the ball forward. In fact, I'd be willing to bet that the initial drafts of this brief were far longer than the finished product, because there is so much other relevant material that could have been used, but you simply aren't allowed to file a 100-page motion. The judge doesn't want to read it anyway. This brief has been distilled down multiple times like a fine vodka, and the resulting quality is obvious. As we talk about over the next days or weeks, remember that only one pleading has been filed in this case, the SEC's complaint. That's critical to keep in mind, because a motion to dismiss attacks the sufficiency of what's in that complaint. What's the sole purpose of a motion to dismiss? Neither side has to prove anything at this point. The defendant simply has to show that even if everything the SEC said is true, they still can't win, because when you apply what they said to the relevant law, it isn't enough. That's pretty much the standard the court will apply in a motion to dismiss. Basically, this is attacking that the SEC put in their complaint. I've said before, if you draft a shitty complaint, you can get stuck with it. Here, as I've noted in other PulseChain law school classes, the SEC has some glaring deficiencies in their complaint, and RH's team didn't miss any of them. A lot of them are highlighted in the preliminary statement that starts on page 1. Whenever you see words, and this is a key, not alleged, alleges no, fails to allege, etc., or similar statements, that is pointing the judge right to the fact that the SEC failed to properly add critical things into their complaint, and as a result, can't prove their claims. In fact, if I had $1 for every time RH's team pointed out the SEC's failed to allege something to this memorandum, I could probably take my wife out for perfect filet and a bottle of Chateau Margaux. There are generally two reasons the SEC would fail properly allege something. Either they suck at their job, or they simply didn't have the goods. I guess there's a little of column A and column B. We agree with that. Finally, he says, my personal opinion in this is that the SEC got cocky after a string of relatively easy wins, didn't think they needed to put in the work on this complaint because it's just not well drafted. After all, if you keep collecting scalps without much effort, you assume the next scalp you try and take will be just as easy, but eventually you run into a bigger bear, and it's clear that Richard has no intention of being scalped. So very encouraging to hear, just from somebody that has his legal expertise.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's awesome to hear that. And he always puts so much thought in, maybe he's just a natural writer, but they're always so well written, well thought out. And it's great to read things like that, especially from someone that knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, very encouraging indeed. I'm sure we're going to see more come out of this over the coming days. I believe there is going to be a meeting with that case on Thursday. Is that the 11th? Yeah. Regarding things moving forward. We'll get into that as much as we can next week. We wanted to get into a whole bunch of other stuff tonight, but Frank, bombed us at the last second wanting to come on, and we definitely wanted him to come on. And I love that conversation. And I agree with what we said with him earlier. Like, we do need more of that, like more of that kind of personal finance stuff, because people come into crypto, get rich quick, and just have a stupid head on their shoulders, and they're not ready for it, So we appreciate Frank coming on tonight. So any final thoughts from you at all tonight, Ewok?
No, I don't think I have anything else other than I am going to tattle on myself because I did capitulate and buy a little bit of PDI.
Oh yeah, I forgot that was going to be a big topic tonight. But
yeah, well, we're not going to make a big topic out of it. But the more I thought about it, and I kept saying, well, I don't think that it's not going to go up. My issue is still pegging it to $1. I did hear rumors at one point where there was $1 million paid to the maker people to do something with the code for PulseChain. I read it at one point, and then I went back to look for it again later, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So if anybody's got information on that topic specifically, I'm very curious, because I want to know what was changed in the code, if there is something out there that would stop the new minting of new tokens until a certain point or whatever it may be. I'm very curious. I want to learn a little bit more about that. But yep, I capitulated. I bought a little bit. It wasn't much, and it was part of some incentive rewards. So I didn't sell anything. I didn't emergency end stake anything. I was wise about it and didn't do anything crazy. So I wanted to tattle on myself before it was made a big deal of. And
well, it is a big deal, and we're glad to have you
That's
aboard the PDI train. You know, we're happy to have you here. So we'll probably talk about it more next week. And you know, it's all PDI is all the talk of PulseChain right now. So sure, we'll have more to talk about it next week too.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, you've got a lot of other things that are popping off now too. I know Axis and those guys were on with shit. I can't even remember now. I had it on the tip of my tongue.
I think Crispy Man and
Well, yeah, they were all talking, and Randy.
Yeah.
They've created some little kind of like the Atropa, what they're doing, as well with all the different liquidity bonding. They've got something very similar going with Axis and Fire, and what's the other one? I'm drawing a complete blank on it.
I thought it was Randy Hilarski. I don't know. I didn't really see much today.
Is it Spark? Solid X, that's what it is.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. I didn't know you meant the token. Yeah.
No, so those things are all like kind of interwoven and tied together with they're bonded with different pairs and all kind of moving up together. It's kind of interesting. There's a lot of people that are doing things like this right now that are, you know, creating tokens and then bonding them together with other tokens and seeing how when one thing pumps, they all kind of do. And it's interesting. I just, you know, I hope well, anyway, we'll go.
Hey, we'll get into it more.
Yeah,
we'll get into it more next week. We need to get to Betty by. We're old men, and we got stuff we got to do tomorrow morning. So, that said, this is a great show tonight. We appreciate all of you guys in the chat here: Marco, Djin, Moonboy, Hexgirl, Rolando, Pulse Former, lot more. Mark, Martin Von Wundergas. Hopefully, you got
thanks
an answer
again
there.
to Cody for the super chat.
Cody, thanks for the super chat, man. Good luck to you. Appreciate all you guys. We'll be back here next Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We do this every single Tuesday night. So for my co-host, Crypto Ewok, this has been Boi Crypto. Catch you guys next week right here on the Creed of Crypto podcast. See you guys.